We continue here in Indianapolis out of the 2025 Scouting Combine. Craig Grialou, Dani Sureck, and once again for the second straight year, pleased to be joined by Trevor Sikkema, Pro Football Focus. Always a pleasure to have you sit down with us. You, by the way, you were telling us before we hit record here that this is your favorite event of the year.
Without a question, yeah. I mean, it's so cool to get to connect with you guys, connect with other teams' digital, markets, and just get to really just have a lot of the conversations that I feel like have been building over the last few months as we're building out the PFF draft guide. It's like, okay, we're getting to learn the players, but then you start to really get to talk about them in a team sense and these fits and where these players could be going. Obviously, getting to talk to the players and hear their podium sessions is great as well. So I love the city of Indianapolis. I love this here. It's so walkable. So getting to see media members, getting to do shows like this, it's just such a blast for me.
When we were talking to you here this time last year, Cardinals had 12 picks compared to the 6 they have now.
Sure.
Looking at the season for those rookies, some of those big names, Marvin Harrison Jr., Darius Robinson, Trey Benson, Max Melton.
Yeah.
What do you make of the rookie class as a whole that got a significant amount of game reps with the Cardinals?
Yeah, I love that Max was able to get the playing time that he was. I thought that he was one of the most versatile defensive backs that we had in last year's class. I was a big fan of his, so him getting to land with the Cardinals, I thought it was great that he was getting playing time as a rookie. I think he'll be fantastic. I think him and Garrett Williams being able to sort of have that inside-out versatility is great for that defense. There's no doubt about it. Dadrian Taylor-Demerson as well. Like, he's somebody who I remember watching him at the Shrine Bowl, and he was somebody who – new event, okay, whether it's Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, or whatever, they're taking these guys, they're taking them out of their college defenses, they're kind of, plopping them in a random spot, random coaching staff for the first time. So it takes a little bit of time for these guys to get acclimated. And I remember day one of practices, DTD was like teaching the other defensive backs what they were supposed to be doing in that system. And I was like, didn't you also just learn this? Like, how now? But he was the one who was teaching everybody. So it was great to see him get a lot of playing time. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr., look, I know some people can look at it and look at Malik Neighbors' season or Brian Thomas Jr.'s season and maybe think it's a little bit of a disappointment. It's not. He's going to be fine. He's a great wide receiver. He's going to be a wide receiver one for the Cardinals moving forward. So even what we saw as a rookie, I thought was fantastic from him as a baseline moving forward. And then, a couple of the other guys just getting in the mix, and I feel like that's what the Cardinals needed. They were at a point where they needed sort of that infusion of those young guys to sort of usher in what was going to be the next core of the roster. And I really did. I thought that Monty Austinfort did a really good job of doing that last year.
Another one of those rookies that got some playing time until the end of the season when he was hurt was running back Trey Benson. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the second or third running back off the board when he was selected in the third round. He's behind James Conner, but that combination and working well together, because I think we've seen, especially in the postseason, there might be a switch back to maybe more of a running style, or at least leaning a little bit more on the ground game based off the success of the playoff teams.
No, absolutely. And Trey's a guy who he's physically built for the position. He'll give you those yards after contact. He'll give you those tough yards that you love. But, not as much his last year when he was in college, but the year before, I mean, the missed tackles forced per attempt number was through the roof for him. And it's because he's got such quick footwork, that short area burst. He can make you miss in a phone booth, as they say. And just getting him and James Conner in the same backfield is such a great 1-2 duo because, man, we saw so many times, last year, like the San Francisco 49ers game sticks out to me, the one where the Cardinals were able to get that victory because of how they were able to run the ball down the stretch. And I think that, a lot of people with the alien passers that we see in this league and some of the crazy passing numbers that we saw 3 or 4 years ago, everybody just says, oh, no, the run game is dying. Football is always a cycle. And I think that we had that point where you had all these 4,000, 5,000-yard passers, whatever it was, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and now a lot of teams are leaning more back into, okay, well, if you're going to lighten up the box, if you're going to play nickel a lot, well, we're just going to run it between the tackles. And I think having two guys that you can trust, Trey Benson being the one to be able to spell James Conner, is important for any team, but especially the Cardinals. They got a good one.
Looking at this year's draft class, big areas of need for the Cardinals, defensive line, edge, two of the more deep classes for this draft. Trait-wise, what do you see from that group, those two groups, that tells you, okay, there's a good amount of players here that could come and make an impact?
Yeah, I think when I think of the Arizona Cardinals when it comes to improving their pass rush this year, if you talk about edge rushers, it's speed, because they've had guys that – they can play at edge, guys who are, pending free agents or guys who are still under contract who it's like, okay, they can play on the edge as that outside linebacker type, but I think they're missing that juice. They're missing that speed from that outside linebacker type of a position, like a James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, a Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, like these guys who just have so much juice coming off the line of scrimmage to be able to threaten the outside shoulder all the time. I feel like they are missing still that presence on their defensive line. And then I think when it comes to their interior defensive line, obviously getting Darius Robinson in there is great because I think that he could play anywhere from a shoot a 3 technique all the way to a stand-up 7 technique when it comes to his versatility and what he could be able to do. But I think this draft class is great for guys like that. You've got guys like Walter Nolan or Kenneth Grant or Jamari Caldwell. There's just so many players on this defensive line that sort of fit exactly what the Arizona Cardinals are going to want. So it's a great year to need interior defensive line because they don't even have to pick one in the first round, right? It's something where I genuinely believe rounds 2 and round 3 you can get starters along the defensive line, which you do not get to say most of the time.
I was going to ask you that because we're hearing a lot on how deep those two positions are. So at 16, how do you weigh what position versus, okay, maybe we can wait for 47 in the second round, but now maybe it's a little bit lesser of a guy talent-wise, but it's so deep that, okay, we want the higher-end guy in a certain position group, and then we can, I wouldn't say settle, but now look for something else that maybe not be top tier.
Yeah, I still think that it can work out both ways, right? I mean, we had that same conversation with the wide receiver class last year, where it was a really deep wide receiver class, and you'd kind of talk to different teams and fans who would be in different positions in the draft, and you go, well, wait a second, do we really need to spend a first-round pick on a Marvin Harrison Jr. or a Malik Neighbors or a Brian Thomas Jr., knowing that we could probably get a good wide receiver a little bit later? And it's like, yeah, sure, you can do that, but you don't want to get too cute about the draft, right? I mean, if a guy is really good, you want to pick him. So especially for an area that is as important as getting after the passer and being a better pass rushing team, if there's a guy that's available for them at number 16, again, like a James Pierce Jr., a Mike Green, a Walter Nolan, a Kenneth Grant, something like that they love these players, don't just tell yourself, let's look over them because we can get them in the second and third round. You'd only really want to do that if you have another guy at another position that you also love that is in that same similar group. And I'm not convinced that that's going to be the case. I feel like they're going to be honed in on one of these defensive linemen because I feel like they're going to have a good one to pick at 16.
A lot of talk about those 2 spots on defense. What's another position group in this draft class that you really like?
So I think the linebacker group is a lot better than people are giving it credit for. I think probably in the middle of the college football season, we were maybe grasping at straws, wondering who was going to be in this class, and now we got a ton of players. I mean, Carson Schweschinger from UCLA, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, Jihad Campbell from Alabama, depending on what you think of Jalen Walker from Georgia. All of a sudden, I'm just rattling off great linebackers that I think are going to be good pros, and that wasn't the case about 4 months ago. So I think that part of the class is getting a little bit better. The tight end class is excellent this year. I know the Cardinals just picked one in Tip Ryman last year, but the tight end class is very excellent. Offensive line, it's not the best year for offensive line, but it's very intriguing because there's a lot of players that played tackle in college who will probably kick into guard or center at the NFL level, and you can sometimes look at that as like a little bit of a negative, but instead I think it's just a lot of players who have a lot of versatility. So are they, is it Joe Walt? Is it Rashawn Slater? Is it Tristan Wirfs? Okay, maybe not, but it's a lot of players who you still need a great starting 5 out there, and I still think there's a lot of tackles that are those hybrid players that can give you those starting positions. So for the Cardinals, if they wanted to upgrade at the tackle spots or if they felt like they needed a starter along the interior, they might have the ability to draft that type of a player in the first round. So going back to sort of what you said, like if one of those guys falls to them at 16 and they feel good enough about it, well, then they could say, hey, we might be able to get a pass rusher a little bit later. That's a scenario where, going back to your question, I'd say, okay, I could understand that for Arizona.
The line of scrimmage seems to be, it's what determines how successful you are as a team.
No doubt.
Yet when you're talking about draft prospects, it's quarterbacks, wide receivers, it's the skill position players, and we know that there are 2 quarterbacks here that have kind of separated themselves, but there's always a quarterback that gets drafted maybe higher than they should.
Mm-hmm.
Could that benefit the Cardinals at 16 if there's a 3rd or 4th quarterback potentially Or is that wishful thinking?
No, of course. I don't think we'll get a fourth. We might get a third. Coming off of the Senior Bowl, a lot of people were talking about Jackson Dart, the quarterback from Ole Miss, really making a rise on the draft rankings and potentially into draft weekend. I'm not as in on Jackson Dart to be a first-round pick as it seems like other people are, but hey, the ones that matter are the ones who are making the pick, especially when it comes to relative to what that means for Arizona. So I do think there is a chance that we could get a third quarterback before pick number 16. It all depends on sort of what happens in free agency and how in these teams are on certain players, right? Like, what's Aaron Rodgers' market? What's Sam Darnold's market? Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, Jameis Winston, right? Do these quarterback-needy teams like the New York Giants, the New York Jets, the Las Vegas Raiders, certainly what happens with the Cleveland Browns or the Tennessee Titans at the very top, how much are they able to supplement those quarterback needs in free agency before we get to the draft and not feel like they have to take one with their first-round pick? I think that'll answer the question of how much a guy might be able to slide for the Cardinals picking in the middle of the first round.
One last question before we got to let you go is about Pro Football Focus. That was something we were kind of talking about, Craig.
The love-hate relationship that a lot of players have with
sure.
what
right, with
you do.
Grades?
Sure.
But for arguments, I mean, you're not in charge of the grades.
Yes.
Yet at the same time, it can be a helpful supplement to kind of let what you're seeing, and then sometimes it's like, well, yeah, you don't know what I'm doing.
Of course.
Yet all of a sudden I got a bad grade.
Yes, yeah. No, it's look, it's not a perfect science, but we do have a really great team at Pro Football Focus. There are so many moving parts that go into all the data collection and watching all these reps and obviously teaching all the data collectors exactly what they need to be looking for. And we've got a great system, but it's not perfect. And I tell people that all the time. We're learning every single year, and we get former coaches to come in and help us with consulting of exactly what we might be looking at. But, of course, we'll never get it perfect, especially like coaches are always trying to disguise what coverage they have or what they're doing on the fronts. And obviously if they are trying to disguise it so an offensive coordinator doesn't know what's coming, well, obviously it's going to be hard for us to know what's coming too. So we think that we do a pretty good job with the information that we have, but it's something where we are always learning. We are always trying to get better too. We know the grades are never going to be perfect, but get it as close as we possibly can to. Most of the time, we are getting it right, whether it's crediting for a good play, a bad play, whatever it is. So it's something that's always evolving, and it's part of what is really cool about being part of that team.
What you guys do really well is the mock draft simulator, and I thoroughly enjoy it because you get to play general manager. So, Trevor, we'll play general manager until April, and the Cardinals are on the clock. Always a pleasure, and appreciate your time.
I love to hear it about the mock draft sim, but appreciate it, guys, anytime.